Hi, everyone. Hi, it is a pleasure to be here. My name is Florencia Renedo. I am a safeguards analyst working at the Nuclear Regulatory Authority of Argentina and a proud Win for Peace member. Today's webinar, Voices of Diplomacy, Wisdom from Two Generations, bring together two incredible women who represent different paths and experiences in nuclear diplomacy. Now, let me briefly introduce our panelist, Jenny Gromol, non-resident fellow at the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies with deep expertise in international cooperation and nuclear non-proliferation, and Maite Unzaga, an Argentine diplomat specializing in nuclear affairs, currently posted at the Embassy of Argentina in Brazil. Thank you both for joining us today. We are very happy to have you here. So, Eva, the floor is yours.
Well, a warm welcome to our webinar. You have heard the introduction. Before we start, I would just like to give you a brief introduction of Win for Peace, who we are and what we do. Peace. Win for Peace was founded 2 years ago in order to contribute towards world peace through the involvement of more women in the 4 subject areas: nuclear non-proliferation, safeguards, export controls, and disarmament. And we do this by conducting coordinated activities across all 4 domains, in particular through education and training. So this is one of our webinars. Our members are about 30 from 4 continents. It's open to all WIN Global members to join our group. I'm the current leader, and here is my email address in case you want to join. Here are some photos of our members. We have a new member, one new member on the top left, a male member, our first man. So welcome to our recent member, Zele from Angola. And we also have 2 supporters, the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, the VCDNP, and the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs at Vienna. We have conducted several educational webinars and hybrid events, and we announce our events on social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and also via email to all those who have participated before. Our events are mostly open to everyone. And we also have a dedicated YouTube channel, WIN Global YouTube channel, where you can find the recordings of previous webinars. From 2023, we conducted the webinars on the following topics: nuclear non-proliferation regime, the basics, national, regional, and international safeguards, export control basics, Iran's nuclear program, the EQ Khan network, nuclear disarmament, amongst others. We also looked at nuclear propulsion, nuclear weapons basics, the nuclear fuel cycle, nuclear weapon-free zones, nuclear physics basics, then the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. In 2025, we have had 5 webinars so far on novel equipment for IAEA safeguards activities. We looked at the safeguards implementation in Cameroon, which is a small quantities protocol state with an additional protocol in force. We also had a speaker from the United Arab Emirates who talked about the transition from a small quantities protocol to full scope safeguards. We had a workshop on work-life balance and communication skills. And last month, we had speakers from Chalk River Laboratories presenting on their decommissioning and stored liquid waste project update. So here is our 6th webinar, Voices of Diplomacy, Wisdom of Two Generations. I would also like to avert you to joint webinars between Win4Peace and Women in Innovation on emerging nuclear technologies relevant for the nuclear field, including their opportunities and challenges. So we have had 2 webinars so far, one on an overview of emerging nuclear technologies. And yesterday we spoke about AI and digital twins in nuclear power, transforming construction, operation, and analytics. Future sessions will include talks about robotics, additive manufacturing, blockchain technology, and IAEA safeguards applications, and also some of the challenges of these emerging technologies for nuclear non-proliferation. So if you are interested, please follow us on LinkedIn, connect with us, and you will get all the updates on our webinars. So without any further ado, please let me hand back to Florencia. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, for your presentation. Now let's get started. Maite, Jenny, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Florencia. Thank you very much, Eva, for organizing this event. I feel very honored and grateful to be sharing this panel with Jenny Grummel. And I would like to thank also the IT team of WIN, I know in the person of Agostina Serrano, who are giving support to this event and for making things go really smoothly. So thank you very much for all the efforts on today's event. Just as a brief introduction, well, we were invited by Eva to be part of this event to share our experiences in nuclear diplomacy from 2 generations, as the title of this event states. And well, we've been talking a lot with Jenny on how to proceed with this task today, and we came up with an idea, which is having a conversation between the 2 of us, sharing experiences that connect us, even though sometimes we were at the same time at the same place, but sometimes we were not, and still we were connected through these events. And we think they're going to be very relevant for our colleagues that are joining us today. Just a quick note on how we're going to proceed, as the idea is to have more an informal conversation between the 2 of us and to have time to have Q&A as well. The idea is to have a presentation that will support our conversation. Mainly, we will be sharing pictures of certain experiences we had. So we're going to be jumping in and out on the presentation. And we're going to make a try with this. And so it might have some difficulties, but we'll see how we manage to do this. So very brief as well. The idea of today's presentation will be to have 3 specific topics to talk about. First, very brief introductions on who we are and how we end up choosing the careers that we're in. Then sharing some of our experiences. And lastly, talking about where are we today and what we look forward for the future, which I think it's very significant for everyone present here today. So just getting started. Our presentations, I'm gonna begin, and then I'm gonna give the floor to Jenny. My name is Maite Unzaga, as Florencia said. I'm from Argentina. I am a diplomat since 2018. And it was a good exercise to think about why did I choose this career. I have to say very briefly and shortly that I was very curious about international relations since I was in high school. At that time, I was very engaged with public speaking and debate and reading about international events. And I remember I had a teacher that saw that in me, saw that curiosity, and gave me the opportunity to do something with that. And I remember she came one day and she said, "Would you like to join this team that we're making up for a UN model?" And I just said yes without even thinking about it, even though I didn't know what a UN model was. At that time, I was 14, 15 years old. And I remember I just went there because I just was curious. I wanted to do something new. And when I stepped 1 foot there, I just realized I wanted to do that for my life. And that's when I started researching what I could study to work on this field. And for those ones who might not know what a UN model is, it's basically a mock exercise in which students role play different countries in the United Nations General Assembly, and you negotiate and you adopt resolutions. And well, so that just was for me very significant to choose my career. I studied international relations at Universidad Torcuato Di Tella in Buenos Aires, the province from which I am in Argentina. And I got my bachelor there, and then I just did I sat for all the exams to become a diplomat in 2015. This is a very long process of different stages. I made it through it. And after 2 years studying in the Institute of the Foreign Service in Argentina, I became a diplomat. And here's where I want to share a picture of that moment. This is when I took my oath with the president at that time, Mauricio Macri, as a diplomat in 2018. For me, it's a very significant picture because it marks the start of my career as a diplomat. So, Jenny, we go back to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I think that one thing we need to point out is that normally these meetings are an hour and a half, and our hosts have allowed us an hour at least in 15 minutes. I think the ending will be probably more interesting for my lessons learned than maybe the rest of it, but we'll see. The first thing I want to say is to apologize for how many times I'll say I in this presentation. You're always with a really strong team and you never do it alone. And the fact that they've asked us to speak specifically about our own careers directly, obviously emphasizes this, but I don't think I've ever used I so many times, so apologies in advance. Just up front, in case we run short for time, my general guidance is, I was thinking about it this morning, and ironically, they're all with H's. I didn't do this on purpose, but to be humble, hardworking, honest, tell the truth to all levels, everyone you're speaking to, up and down the chain, and do everything with heart. And they're all H's, strangely enough. But the thing that most struck me about this was I was speaking at the UN disarmament conference in Hiroshima, and I was the US representative, and I had my hardcore talking points, but I started it by saying, you don't do disarmament for 30 years and not believe in it. And the next day, there were headlines in the big newspapers of one of the most famous, Hibakusha, saying she'd never listened to the US position before, but it was clear that I had put years and years of work into doing this. Especially as a United States representative, it was important to her that she knew I saw her and I understood. So I think this is important in all the things you do. Let me first also share an important piece of advice that I don't want to get lost. I had a longtime boss, Ambassador Robert Mikulak, who I worked with on the chemical weapons bilaterals in the 1980s. And he had on his wall, he became later the OPC, the first US ambassador to the Chemical Weapons Convention. He had on his wall a picture of Halabja, where the children were killed during the chemical weapons attack of Iraq on Iran. And next to it was a placard that said, patience and fortitude. And his point was, we do all of this work, but remember it's life and death. This isn't just working on words on paper. This really matters. And I think that always stuck with me. His other guidance that used to make me and one of my counterparts, Chris Park, nearly crazy, but the longer I did this, the more I understood, and I want to get it up front. We would work on something. He would say, go away, figure it out yourself. And you'd come in and say, there's just this one last piece. I really need your advice. And his answer was, let your conscience be your guide. Let your conscience be your guide. I need a real answer, real time. This is a crisis. Please don't let that be your answer. But what it meant was always do the right thing. And that's sort of my lesson through all of this, of those people who taught me, who were 25 years older at the time, that have stuck with me all these years. So my most influential experience was going to school in Vienna in 1983 on the Johannesgasse in Palais Corbelli, right across the street from the Hochschule für Musik, So I was there both for the music, but also because this was the farthest east you could go. And I was very interested in relations with the Soviets and how things functioned on the front lines. I had an internship. I had a class in current Eastern European politics, and it was while Lech Walesa was starting the Solidarity movement in Poland, which became the string that unraveled the whole Soviet Union. So I'm studying that, but I'm working as an intern at UNIDO, the UN Industrial Development Organization, which is just there next to the IAEA in the Vienna International Center. That was my first job. And I worked for the former finance minister of the Shah of Iran. And his whole job was in 1983 to get his counterparts out after the 1979 removal of the Shah. And I couldn't understand him, so I took Farsi lessons, which helped me later on, I'll explain. Then I had an international finance course with the finance minister of Austria, and he lined me up with a job at Chase Manhattan Bank. And that also was doing East-West. Kobe, who'd been one of the 2 women held hostage the whole time in Iran, 444 days. She was the cultural attaché, and she was very interested in the Fulbright program, but I was very interested in the music program. And at the time, the embassy would go to the airport and meet Leonard Bernstein, James Levine, and I used to study in the Musikverein. So it was the perfect combination. And the number 2 in the embassy then was Felix Bloch, who was the highest level person ever accused of spying for the United States, never confirmed. But he had me do a study of the effect of the peace protests in Germany for the US missile deployments and the effect on the Austrians. And the ambassador at that time was Helena von Damm, who had left Austria on Kristallnacht and had been the personal secretary of Ronald Reagan. And he sent her back as the US ambassador to Austria. So this combination of people was sort of working on me. And I realized that I didn't want to join the UN because it's very hard for US people because of geographic distribution. I didn't want to join the banking community because it wasn't enough just to work the numbers. And at the embassy, I had the feeling that I was taking expertise from Washington and translating it in a foreign language to an expert in the country, and then translating it back and forth. And I actually didn't want to be the middleman. I wanted to be the one who was involved in the substance. And this was long before there were emails, but later on, of course, we wrote directly substance to substance, and it changed sort of the role of the people on our embassies. But my lesson here is very early on, go work in any place you think you might have a potential where you want to work. And you might find out before I even graduated that I didn't want to work in the 3 big systems, which would have cost me 2 or 3 years of training programs, but I already knew that I didn't want to do those. So I think that's probably the most important start. Also, I went to Egypt and Israel during my spring break, and later on, this had a huge impact on the way I looked at things and understood the world. And I ended up doing Middle East Peace Process, the Arms Control and Regional Security Working Group, because I had such a fascination, because again, travel early while you can, before you have commitments. Go to conflict places, realize what you want to do early, and then all of us can help you get there. Over. Madi, back to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. As you were speaking, it's so wonderful to hear your story, Jenny. And well, in my case, it was in college. I didn't get a chance to travel so much, but I remember when I was studying, I had a subject on international organizations, and I learned about the IAEA and all the nuclear peaceful applications there were, because all I knew about that time was only the consequences of nuclear weapons. So it was very enlightening for me to have that subject. And one very curious thing that happened is that that professor I had in that subject that really made me want to get into nuclear, I found him many years after, and we were sharing an event on nuclear disarmament verification. I was representing Argentina. He was there as an academic, and it was very nice to meet after that, and sharing that moment and saying, okay, you are to blame. You just put the seed of interest in nuclear enemy. So yeah, I really hear you, and it's very important to find people that can inspire us and encourage us to find and follow our passions. So that's very important. So okay, moving on.
I might add
we would
one
like-
more thing
yeah,
that I
sure, yes,
forgot.
please. Yes, please.
Before we get into our international world, and I wanted to point out that I had internships for the whole summer when I first came to Washington, and people feel badly that they haven't landed a job. But consider the interviews you have as an internship. I learned more in that summer than I would have in just one place, and I ended up with a job doing NATO long-term planning. And my first acronym, I called my father and I said, Dad, you can't imagine. It's the Slow Pig, which was the senior level weapons protection group. And it was doing all the drafting of the briefing books for this high level group. And also, I was the idiot in the room for a group called the Defense Science Board and the Jason's Group. And these were the people that were the big thinkers. Our project was the top 10 technologies for the next 20 years. And my job was to put my hand up and say, I don't understand, as if I was a congressional staffer. But one of the points I'll make later is don't ever consider that it's below you to be asked to take the notes, or in my case, to be considered the secretary. I was able to get into these rooms and hear from these top Pentagon officials on things we're talking about now, the predecessor to the Golden Dome theoretical missile umbrella that we talk about now was the Strategic Defense Initiative and something called Brilliant Pebbles. Always be there to take the notes. It gets you in the room. So then just one more quick thing. Those experiences I had in Vienna, I ended up working for the Senate House Iran-Contra Committee. And it was because I could understand the Persian accent of Ghorbanifar, the main interlocutor. I had the clearances for the TOW missiles that were being exchanged because I had this NATO US Pentagon job. And I knew the hostages because of my association with them. And the German banking terms were the same in Vienna that they were in Zurich. So take internship opportunities and you'll be amazed at how you can turn them into something else. Now back to you, we can get into diplomatic life. But again, lessons, take what comes your way. You'll tie it together over time.
Before we jump into the next section, I don't know if you want to share some comments on this picture, Jenny.
This was my very first diplomatic reception. And the man on the right is a very famous Mexican ambassador, Garcia Robles. And he was famed at the time for just having completed a nuclear weapons-free zone in Latin America called Tlatelolco. And right behind my barrette was another famous Mexican ambassador, Marin Bosch. And my point here is, even when you're really young, as I was always very lucky, and I think it started right then, where you realize that speaking to everyone is important, and the lessons that they give you, and they'll give you grace for being young. This was really my first time in Geneva, and our meetings were in the League of Nations building, which was a little daunting in the UN headquarters in Geneva. And I was the only woman along with Martine Letts from Australia. So I can talk about that a little bit later. But this picture sort of captures it, because in my first meeting in the Conference on Disarmament, this Ambassador Garcia Robles was the president of the CD, and he chose to start with nuclear weapons-free zones. It was my very first day as the US representative in the chair in this monstrous historic room. And the Indian and the Pakistani ambassador said to him, let's not put our new colleague on the spot. Clearly she is capable or she wouldn't be here, but let's go around the room and tell our positions on nuclear weapons-free zones. So you can count on the kindness of strangers. And that made a huge difference. And from then on, they would invite me to their private events. And I became known as the daughter of the non-aligned, which basically meant that I had been trained by these high-level ambassadors from the non-aligned because I was such an innocent bird sitting there that first day. So this picture says a lot. Enough on that. Thanks.
It's very nice. That's very nice. It's a great story. Okay, moving on to some professional milestones or experiences that we've had. We were also talking a lot with Jenny about which would be good experiences to share. And well, as a big umbrella, we just named this part the fellowships. I remember when I started working in the Division of International Security, Nuclear and Space Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when I graduated from being a diplomat. I worked there for 5 years, and of course it was very new for me. And I remember my first boss there, Minister Gabriela Martinique. She had an amazing career in this issue. She covered First Committee in New York many times, and I remember she said to me, "This is a very technical field, and as diplomats, we need to be prepared, to be always prepared." So she said, you have to make the best out of every opportunity you get to study, to learn more, to prepare yourself, to capacity building and developing skills, both because of the technical background, but also during negotiations. So I really took advantage of the opportunities I had. And I was selected to become a United Nations Disarmament Fellow. That to me was one of the most outstanding experiences I've had so far in my short career. This is a program that comes from 1978, and it gathers 25 young diplomats from all around the world, from different countries, and countries with different positions on nuclear and non-proliferation matters. And it's basically living with these colleagues for 3 months, traveling all around the world and visiting the most important international organizations for disarmament and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and also visiting specific countries for specific programs they have or experiences they have. And for me, it was life-changing. Apart from visiting the IAEA, visiting the OPCW, we had the chance to go to Japan to visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We had the chance to go to Kazakhstan and to go to Pakistan. And we also visited Argentina at that time, because we visited ABAC, the Brazilian-Argentine Agency for the Control and Accountancy of Nuclear Materials, on which I'm going to speak later on. But the overall idea of sharing this experience, my experience with you, was that for me, and I take what you said, Jenny, at the beginning, doing disarmament and not believing it, it's very difficult. And I think that being part of that program just strengthened my beliefs in the importance and the contributions we can make to really build a better world, right? Both in trying to keep the access for the peaceful applications of nuclear technology, but also in securing and working towards common understandings to move forward, right? To building a more secure world. And for me, that was incredible. It was an incredible experience. And also I want to highlight the human factor in this. As I said, we came from very different countries and very different positions, but we were all young people there sharing the same emotions while listening to the hibakushas, the victims of the nuclear weapons, and how that resonates in ourselves. And when you go to a meeting and you're representing a position, and sometimes what you're preparing gets so conceptual that it just goes a little bit beyond reality. So being there and experience that those stories from the victims were very, very, very significant for me. So I just wanted to share some pictures of that experience. And here we are in the picture in the left. We were in Buenos Aires at that time. Well, ABAC is still part of the program. And at the time, we just went to Buenos Aires, even though the headquarters of ABAC are in Rio de Janeiro. But still, the organization has an office in Buenos Aires, and we got to meet the secretaries of the agency, and it was very, very, very important for us. The picture on the right is in the IAEA. At the time, unfortunately, DG Grossi wasn't able to join us, but his team was there, and they received us very well. We spent a whole week there, and it was amazing. And then 3 more pictures of this experience. And the picture on the left is where with one of the hibakushas in Hiroshima. We had just heard all her story. She was very little at that time. And it also, I mean, this is the role of people telling their stories on what happened on the events of the past and trying to keep that memory on, which is very important. And then 2 more pictures. I have the one in the middle is me with the girls of the fellow. We were there at the UN headquarters in New York. That was the end of the program. And there were not many of us, but we were all very engaged together, and we're still friends. And that's also significant. And the last picture there is me, Semipalatinsk. It looks like, if you don't know the context, you might think, well, that looks like the Pampas in Argentina, but no, that was a nuclear test site. And having the opportunity to visit this place was very, very significant for my work.
You might also point out that the Indians have a disarmament.
Yes, they do. Yes. Thank you for reminding me that. Yes. Well, India has since 2019, they have a program. It's called the annual program, the Annual Disarmament Fellowship Program. And I had the chance to participate there. I spent 1 month in India learning from the experiences they had. It gathered many relevant and high-level lecturers and professionals in disarmament and non-proliferation field, and that was very significant as well.
So our point in this is apply for these programs. I have had every one of my next generation friends join. And particularly for Americans, this is really important to get the perspectives and the friendships like I had from duress in the CD when all the ambassadors came to my rescue. This is where you meet friends and you keep them for years and years. So my first experience in New York was hosting the UN Disarmament Fellows. And of the students was Shah Zukang, who became a very famous Chinese diplomat, and others, those in our community would know. One of the things that was disturbing, though, is I gave this presentation, and normally they would come to Washington, but we were then restricting the Russians from, or even the Soviets, yes, the Soviets from leaving a 50-mile zone that's allowed around New York City. And somebody put sort of a sexist note on the table. And it always affected me to remember the perspectives of all the people you're speaking to, like this group. We know you're from all over, and we were trying to figure out if you would know the names of the ambassadors in these pictures. And what we're trying to do is share lessons that work across different fields. And that note always got to me, and I'll speak a little bit later how lucky I've been not to have any problems being a very young woman starting this. But that was one of them. That note on the table made you realize not everybody's thinking what you think they're thinking. Next, we'll talk about the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, and I'll pass it back to you, Amaidi.
Thank you, Jenny. Well, yes, and another excellent program, international program that I am grateful for being part of is the CNS Visiting Fellows Program. This gives you the opportunity as a young diplomat to study 1 whole semester within the grad school there at Middlebury Institute. And that was also very, very relevant and important in my career. Again, building on this foundation of being prepared, learning, hearing from others' perspectives, as Jenny was pointing out, and meeting other people. I remember that, well, CNS has a program with a Russian university, and there were Russian colleagues there and many American students as well. And I remember that we were at very different times of our lives and of our careers, but we were sharing and ideas of the future and where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to find and I'm going to meet these friends I made during my CNS time in the future. Definitely, many of them were applying for the Department of State. So again, as Jenny said, it is very important to build this friendship. All in all, diplomacy is about human beings and the social part of that, and how we engage with each other, and having that familiarity and building those bonds with people just make a huge difference when we have to sit and negotiate, when we have to convey certain messages. It's very, very important. So again, just sharing a little bit on what that experience at CNS was. I did this program in 2020, and it was in the middle of the pandemics, but fortunately we could do it remotely. At the right, there's a picture of our exercise, of MPT exercise we had. There's Bill Potter and Jean Dupré and other colleagues. And I remember at that time we were just starting our careers in the field, and now I see the pictures and I see, for example, it's Marta Mariana, who is a high-level officer at the Organization for the Prohibition of Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, OPANAL. She's there. Then it's Jorge, who is a high-level also diplomat in the Mexican Foreign Service, and Paola, who is the head of the was the head of the division of the United Nations in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico. And we actually share later on a group, the governmental group of experts on nuclear disarmament verification. So again, we were there just by chance, but our ways were interconnected, and we met each other again, and this is very important. And also sharing another picture. Well, this is a picture of the screen of the exercise as well. But I wanted to share this picture in the right, which I consider very important, because 5 years after the Visiting Fellows program, I had the chance to go to Monterrey to actually see Middlebury Institute in June this year, and for a short course in safeguards. And that was a very unique experience as well. And again, new friends in the making there.
So as we began to get to know each other, because Eva put us together and we'd never met, we realized we had so many things in common, and we'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. Just to remind, as I said at the beginning, normally these are an hour and a half, which we had counted on. So I hope people can stick around because the lessons learned may be interesting. Ironically, I've been helping the Visiting Fellows program with money from the State Department for the last 5 years, since just after your class. And I just joined the NPT simulation last week and trying to help. And the next picture was from being thanked for the support. It's the first time the State Department had supported CNS directly. This is Jean Dupré, who was my counterpart as a South African diplomat for a long time doing NPT things. And the picture on the right is from Black Sea Non-Proliferation Professionals Exchange, which is a group of mid-career people that Margarita Klein and Paul at CNS in the center in green and I started to ensure that people at the height of their career can also be getting to know each other and do powerful things. And in this group, we had 6, I think, that mainly people from Eastern Europe, Ukrainians, Turkish friends, Bulgarians that had been visiting fellows. So again, what goes around comes around. Back to you.
Definitely. And this just another quick fellowship program, which I wanted to highlight, and I know you have some comments on this, Jenny. I will be very brief so we can move on, but it's the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Fellowship Program. I am proud to say that I am a current fellow right now. I am pursuing my master's degree on global security at King's College London. And here's a picture that I wanted to share on the course on nuclear security that was held this past summer in Vienna, and the relevance and importance of this program. I know you agree with this, Jenny.
One thing that I would point out about this is your government, your jobs are letting you do these fellowships. They take time. It takes a week off, but people understand how critical they are. Marie Curie the fellowship was started by Jacek Bielicza, who is now the chief of staff at the IAEA. He's a Polish diplomat. I knew him from the NATO WMD Center, and then he was EU Special Envoy, and then he was in our G7 groups where we traveled extensively. And he felt very strongly about doing this. And we're going to tell a story a little bit later about Rafael Grossi. So I got in touch with Jacek yesterday and said, what are you doing at this time today? Can you both join just for a split second on your phone? And he said, we're flying to New York. We have to give the IAEA report to the UN General Assembly. We're so sorry. But again, Rafael Grossi was in the Conference on Disarmament with me in the late 80s. And also all the review conference chairmen for the 2015 review conference were people that had been with me when we were kids. I was slightly younger than they were, maybe 10 years, but it's pretty amazing how the friendships carry on. Just stay close. And as I've learned from other people, or one example, I had an intern who then went over to the White House and came back to take the place of my long-term boss. So be good to everyone. You never know.
Definitely. And Jenny, while you were mentioning the MPT, I know you have some great stories to share about it. So maybe we can move forward to your experience within the MPT process.
Well, it would be unfair not to finish a little bit of the introduction of what I've been doing all these years. To put it in sort of simple terms, it's been sort of the art of multilateral negotiations. And particularly for people from the US who don't circulate with others all that often. It was so important that in those days in the CD that I got to know when the North Koreans had a problem or Bangladesh had a typhoon, we knew people. And so you always had this empathy, which helped later. So the different multilateral negotiations over the years have been the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Biological Weapons Convention protocol negotiations, the landmine negotiations, and this was when Lady Diana was working hard with us to promote the need for such a treaty. And also, I've been very lucky to do on-the-ground things. We worked hard to unearth and visit Soviet-Russian offensive bioweapons program laboratories and the dismantlement of Iraq. I was on the UN Special Commission US policy group for 10 years. And also when Muammar Gaddafi decided to get rid of all of his weapons of mass destruction 3 days before Christmas, we had to quickly get in there. So I've been lucky to have these sort of on the ground things. And again, the period of time when I worked, I was so fortunate. So much happened in this time. Then just about the fall of the Soviet Union, we had the CW negotiations, the BW negotiations. There was Middle East Peace Process, an arms control and regional security multilateral group, where I was the Arabist. People in Washington knew the Israelis, but I knew the Arabs because they were the ones in the Conference on Disarmament, those ambassadors. The Egyptians were actually head of Working Group B. So again, these friendships paid off a lot. And then later on, I also added doing the G7, EU, and NATO. and I retired in March. So one of the highlights of multilateral diplomacy for me was this 2015 review conference. And maybe if you'd show the picture, just to give people an idea, this is the podium where we all watch our leaders speak in the UN High Level Week in September. And all of us can sneak up at some point and get our pictures taken. So this isn't doing anything magnificent, but I thought I would show you the view. This is what it looks like when you're up there and you see the green, the yellow, the red light to remind you when to stop speaking. When I was in the CD, you had to learn how to turn the microphone on and where to keep it to speak well, but not in an overwhelming way. But I thought this was really a picture that might be interesting for you to see. If we can go to the next one. This was actually in a presentation that Tariq Rauf did for SIPRI, which is the Stockholm Institute of Peace Research. And what it's showing is I'm on the right with my hand on the piece of paper. And across from me is the Egyptian to the left with the glasses, the Iranian, and Mikhail Ulyanov to the right with the glasses. And everybody gathered around. So for me in the 2015 review conference, one of my lead efforts was to work with the Ukrainians and the Russians on a working paper related to withdrawing from the NPT. And you'll hear it in the news this summer. There was talk about the Iranians leaving the NPT. But the North Koreans left in a way that wasn't considered legal. And so this was an effort to get on paper the need to give 30 days notice and to return the materials you've been given for peaceful uses under the NPT to the country that's given them to you. And what's telling about this picture was everything we do in multilateral negotiations in our field is done by consensus. So this was the end game. This was trying to wordsmith what we would agree to. In the end, it didn't come to fruition. And one of the reasons was that the US, we were given the final document text at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I took it across the street to my boss, Rose Guttmuller, who's a famous character in our world and was later a deputy NATO Secretary General. And I could see her shoulders fall. And it turns out that there had been a deal worked on the Middle East Weapons of Mass Destruction Free Zone. And one of my bosses, Tom Countryman, was in Israel working with them on what the text would be because they're not a member of the NPT. And Adam Schein was our ambassador, and he and Rose had worked very hard with the Russians and the Middle East countries to come up with text that was acceptable. But overnight, in the 3 hours after we got the text, she realized that the deal had been broken. And so the US, Canada, and the UK didn't allow approval, consensus approval of the final document for that review conference. And again, if you work so hard on things, and in the end, it's a consensus rule, it's important because everything that comes out has been agreed by everyone. But as you can imagine, since 2014, we've had a really difficult time finding consensus on things. And then you learn how to do these other arrangements sort of to the side, like the verification and disarmament things that you've been working on that I worked on too. But this is why this particular picture means something to me, because Tariq could have picked any picture, but it was that picture because we were making real progress on this. You might show the next picture quickly. This is at that same meeting, and the man behind me is Ambassador Mohammed Shakir, who's very famous in our world. He was the president of the review conference. These happen every 5 years, in 1985, and he was the senior diplomat in all of the NPT things, and he wrote the definitive history on the NPT. And those are the other Egyptian people and my boss, Piers Corden. But again, those three people were critical to the work in the Middle East peace process later. So again, do well with all people at all time. I'll pass it back to you again. Oh, okay. So the next slide.
Yes.
This might look a little out of character, but I worked closely with Rafael Grossi when we were trying to find the next review conference president. And again, everything's done by consensus. And the Latin group, the Venezuelans were against it. There were all kinds of things we had to work in the New York circles and in Vienna and in Geneva and all the capitals to try to bring this to fruition. And so when he was able to become the RevCon president, our son, who had set up a blacksmithing arrangement in the backyard, taught me a little bit about how to do blacksmithing. So I repurposed something that he had been working on to make this small Thor's hammer, which you see on the right. And I left it rough. I didn't have time to polish it, and gave it to him. And then shortly thereafter, he earned the presidency of the director generalship of the IAEA. So that little Thor's hammer had to travel back to me for me to polish it, to give it back to him again. And this is a picture after I gave it to him, and you see it's a text from him with a picture of it on the leather desk mat that says Tehran today. And he sends me pictures over time in really important meetings, and there's that little Thor's hammer. So I have to thank my son for the design and for the work and for letting me pass this on. Just a small thank you gift and to remind of, you know, we're all there to help each other. And again, I had known him since I was 24. So
yeah, it is.
Pass it back to you.
Yeah, I want to jump in here just to again emphasize that all our paths are interconnected. You were mentioning about Ambassador Grossi. He was appointed to be the president of the 10th Review Conference. And I don't know if everybody in the audience knows, but Ambassador Rafael Grossi is, well, DG Grossi actually, he's an Argentine diplomat. And I had the chance to share some time and work together with him in Buenos Aires just before he was appointed DG. I remember that it was my first year in the Directorate of International Security, 2019. And I had the great opportunity to join the team that would support him in his presidency of the conference. So we started working, I think it was mid-2019. And well, things happened, and well, the election in the IAEA just was that same year, unfortunately, to the disease of Yuyica Amano, the DG at that time. So plans changed, and well, we started working instead of supporting him as the president of the conference in his election, which was a lot of work. And I remember one thing, especially because of what you said at the beginning on the H's and the tips for all of us, right? To be humble. And that is something that really characterized, I think, DG Grossi. And I remember that we were working on his candidature, and he was just sitting next to me in a cubicle at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So that was just for me. It was Ambassador Rafael Grossi, with all his history, with all the participation in so many disarmament and non-proliferation arrangements. So that was very important. And I just wanted to share these two pictures because, well, when he was appointed DG at the time, Ambassador Slauvinen was designated to replace him as the president, the Argentine president to the conference. And so I started working with him and his team, and that was an amazing experience as well. And I think this picture at the right is very nice to share, because I don't know if you can see, but I'm photobombing the picture at the back. That's me in the orange blazer, and we have Ambassador Slavinen and DG Grossi there in the 10th review conference, which was in 2022. And in the picture on the left was me being part of the president's team and just working very closely with him. And for me, that was a very unique experience, which was supposed to be 6 months in 2019 when I started working with him in December. It ended up being a 2.5-year process. Due to the pandemic, the 10th Review Conference was postponed many, many times. And this just was a very difficult thing to address, because we came from the 2015 conference with when no consensus was reached, and so there was a little bit of skepticism towards what was going to happen. But then again, the 10th Review Conference was going to be held in the year that marked the 50th anniversary of the treaty. So many people thought, okay, this is the time to do something, to advance, to move forward. And fortunately, well, the pandemic came and this was postponed. So one of the most important tasks that Ambassador Slavinen was committing to do was to keep momentum. And that just was a very diplomatic training for me, because it was having many meetings during one day, just virtual meetings with regional groups, with bilateral meetings with the groups of different initiatives, just to try to hear what they wanted, just to try to find common ground in working beforehand of the conference.
Do you want to show the
Yes.
picture now? One other thing we found we had in common was Ambassador Slavinen was a key part of a 50th anniversary conference that we had. This was something I organized in 2018. We had one for the opening of Signature, which was a reunion of a lot of the old negotiators, and many of them passed away just shortly thereafter. But for the 50th anniversary itself of entry into force of the NPT, we have there on the podium members of the G7. It turns out the NPT 50th was right after the US had the presidency in 2020 of the group of 7 industrial countries. And we met together and then went to New York for this. And the day after this happened, the whole world shut down. So I'll move quickly with this, but something related to this was my job was to coordinate with the depositories on all these different treaties. And I asked if the Russians and the UK would join on declassifying the negotiating record. And so on the State Department website, we have thousands of original documents that have been declassified that was part of this 50th anniversary. And one other pitch, William Alberg, who was at NATO at the time, also declassified NATO documents at the time, specifically the ones on Articles 1 and 2, if people are interested to go look for that. Then, as you said, the COVID hit, and we were doing the global partnership as part of the larger US effort. And I remember having webinars at 7 a.m., 3 days, every single week through the whole summer. And, you know, this was an ironic time to be disconnected when we were supposed to be in charge of all these huge meetings, but to learn how to live under COVID was really something.
Yeah, definitely. And let me just jump in with another comment on what the 2022 conference meant for me, because you've mentioned so many things about the 2015 conference, and I can draw so many parallels. And again, there, right, I was not only working as part of the Argentine delegation covering Committee 1 and disarmament, but also I was working closely with Ambassador Slavinen, and we were working on the drafting of the final document of the conference. And I just could relate so much to what you were saying about the long working hours in trying to reach consensus for the document and all the expectations that were around this document in a very complex and difficult context, because apart from moving out of the pandemics, we had the war in Ukraine in 2022. And unfortunately, in the last meeting and the last day of the conference, I remember it was 4 p.m., we were at the United Nations Disarmament Office of Disarmament Affairs in New York, all gathered together trying to finalize the document, and we received a call that consensus wasn't going to be possible to achieve. So it was a difficult thing to just assimilate, but it was a very learning experience for me, which I very much value. So I think
Just
we can
one
move
last
forward.
thing on just this picture. Remember to keep up your artwork. We had to come up with a symbol, and that's my little effort.
That is very nice.
Where it comes out.
That is very nice. So I think that as we're running a little bit out of time, we can move forward to lessons learned, and looking forward, right, to what I want to hear what you have to say in this part, Jenny.
Just because I've been at this for so long. One thing I have to point out is that we're very fortunate in the US to have a group of civil servants. So I was able to work alongside our Foreign Service officers, as I had done in Vienna, but I was able to stay with the same disarmament effort. And that was really important, where you could build on it. But in foreign ministries, very often people rotate in and out. So we meet you first in one of these capitals, and then you go to another, and then you come back, but you've moved up. So it's still important that we all stay close, but I had a unique experience. The first thing I want to pass on is something we were just talking about. Before you make a presentation, take 3 deep breaths. I had a speaker series, and I took care of Kamilah Sadat, who was Anwar Sadat, Egyptian president's daughter. And she said he taught her that. And of course, we know this now, and we think about the benefits of getting oxygen to your brain and relaxing. But that was a huge piece of advice to me when I was really young. Another critical one, and I don't know if you've heard this before, he who holds the pen owns the meeting. And as I said at the beginning, never be reticent to be the young person that's asked to be able to take notes. I used to take word for word notes in the small square notebooks from Europe, and I could read it back when the Soviet ambassador would say, I didn't say that. Be a good note taker, learn how to do it, and learn how to do it quickly, because you're in the room. But then later on, when WikiLeaks came out, or now when I'm working on oral history, and preserving the documents that have been declassified now. If you look back, and I was the right hand to the ambassador in all these negotiations, it was me who wrote the cables. And so in this oral history effort, we were able to declassify 900 boxes of the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency negotiating record. And I'm working now to have the ambassadors and we, the practitioners and young people, to study these records, to hold on to what worked and what didn't work, so that when the world comes back together again, we have that. I think that one is just critical. And my first introduction, I would suggest everybody stay interested in looking backwards. My first job was for the director of the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency that was set up by John F. Kennedy to have an independent voice of the State Department on arms control. And we were the agency that led all the negotiations. But my first job was for Major General Burns, who was Bill Burns' father, who was our recent CIA director, Deputy Secretary of State. So an interesting family. On my 20th birthday, I was in Vienna, and I remember recording Radio Free Europe and Radio Moscow and what was going on. On my 25th, I was in New York City doing UN First Committee. And on that day, before I went to New York, my boss came in and, before computers, dropped a stack of, in feet, 3 feet of documents on my big old world desk. and said, welcome to Freedom of Information Act. And he knew it was my 25th birthday. And he knew I was born on the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And these were the Cuban Missile Crisis documents that were having their first review after 25 years.
Impressive. I have this picture. I think you'd love to comment on this.
Again, the Old Friends Network. This is Laura Holgate in the blue, who's just been our 2-time ambassador to the IAEA and to UN offices in Vienna. Laura Rockwood is a famous character who was 30 years as the legal advisor to the IAEA and having crafted the additional protocol. And Raphael when he was younger, and I had bangs.
That's a very cute picture. So, okay, wrapping up a little bit. Sorry for that. Wrapping up a little bit on
But
this.
I have a few more I can do very fast.
Oh, sure, please do.
Lessons
Yes.
learned. I think it's really important what I learned from my longtime ambassador, Don Maley. When you come with your guidance, the whole room would wait. You would take a break and go home, and they would wait. And we were literally pulling out of the protocol negotiations after 7 years. The whole room turns to you, 500 people, and they expect the US to give an update. But my ambassador would lean back and he would sort of do this with his fingers, and everybody knew that meant he was expecting the allies to be well briefed and sort of make the Western case, and then for the non-aligned group to make their case and to get it back in a Gordian knot again. And only then could he sort of ride in on the white horse with the same guidance that would have upset people, by showing that we did all this at home to game out what everybody's positions would be and actually would put forward something that would work. It's really important to read the room before you jump in. And that was one of the lessons that always has stuck with me. Another few simple ones: always have a suit jacket handy. You never know when you're going to be grabbed to go to a meeting, and you better be ready. Be taken seriously at every meeting. This is really the first step, and dress for your ambitions. Dress for having a meeting with the Secretary of State, because it happens. Dare to share your drafts when you're applying for something. Your name starts to circulate for other things. And there are just so many networks now. We didn't have that sort of in my day. And when you apply, very often there's a very short description, 250 words. And having reviewed these for internships and fellowships for all these years, you can tell if there'll be a good fit in the first sentence. In the first sentence, don't start with I. Be concise. Don't use extra words like that. And show understanding of the role, but also be humble and show some sense of warmth or humor. We're trying to figure out the whole person in just those few sentences. And so that's really critical, and share them with friends who you trust. Never compare resumes, ever. All of them that reach us check the basic boxes, but only we know what the right fit is. You have an office of all kinds of characters, and only when we talk to you in person will we know. And remember that we need you more than you need us. Don't ever forget that. You're interviewing us too. You can look elsewhere, but it takes us years to find a position and finding a person who you want to share years of your life with, especially as we're civil servants. If you fit, you're a gift. And for government jobs, we hope you'll be patient to wait, because it takes a long time to get security clearances and all. Almost at the end, there are always more hours in the day. When people say, I just don't have time to apply, sleep is not optional over time, but there are always more hours in the day. And, make sure that you get fresh air, and if something doesn't work out, just write and ask and tell them there are circumstances you can't control. Everybody's human. When you're first in touch with someone, give them 4 tries. Don't give up. Don't feel you're offending them. The first time we say yes, the second time we're ready to do it, the third time we're on a trip, or it gets lost in our email. Don't give up on asking. And the last one for me is, my life motto is, it never hurts to ask, and a good handshake. And I think that's what's sort of fit all these years, and the people that I see that are successful. Over.
Those are brilliant pieces of advice, I must say. And well, just to add, I mean, your career is impressive, Jenny. Again, I'm so
Had a
grateful to be
lucky streak in history.
yeah, but I'm really happy to be sharing this panel with you. And just maybe some final thoughts. As a starting, I'm not even in the middle of my career, but I do look forward to achieving many things. And I think that one of the things that most helped me during this 8 years of my diplomatic career in nuclear affairs has been reaching out to other people that inspire and that encourage me in this path. Going back to the technical background, coming from policy, I remember, and I really want to recognize that in the people that lent me a hand and said, okay, we will help you, what you have to understand, and this and that is so important. Sometimes we just don't get to that because we don't ask, because we don't reach out. So networks are very important. Have the confidence to do that. What you have to give and to contribute is of great value. Even if it's the slightest word in a draft of a resolution, it's still a great contribution. So never stop doing that. And this, surround yourself with people that inspire and encourage you to pursue this. So I think that's, for my part, what I can share and compliment maybe all these amazing pieces of advice that you've given. And with this, I think we're wrapping up this session and this webinar, and maybe going back to Florencia as the moderator of the event.
One second, please. Yes. Wow. What an empowering and inspiring conversation, girls. Thank you so much, Jenny and Maite. The presentation was truly great. I really loved your experience. They are so interesting, and well, I think your reflections give us a lot to think about when it comes to diplomacy across generations. Now we will open the Q&A sessions. So please send your questions in the chat, and then I will read them aloud. Well, while we wait for questions, maybe I can start with my question to you. I have a question for both of you. What do you think was your greatest challenge with regard to diplomacy in general and nuclear diplomacy in particular?
I think I can go first. I was very fortunate to grow up in this multilateral world. So I felt that I was in it with everyone. But one of the hardest things to do is to be the United States representative, where you have a very strong guidance from home that you must come home with, while also being empathetic to other countries. And so the most important thing in negotiations is what's in it for the other side. And it's hard for Americans to realize that this is not what's in it for us, it's what's in it for the other side. And that's how you come to consensus. And the hardest part about being a nuclear weapon state is, as I explained with the Hibakusha, it's hard to have people understand that while we believe and we support deterrence, and as you might have noted, I'm very busy in the game on what's happening with Ukraine. Deterrence is critical. But again, when we all believe in reducing nuclear weapons, and no one should forget that. Over.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that from my part, I share comments that Jenny has made, but I would also recognize that in terms of diplomacy in general, I think that the most challenging thing in my day-to-day work, I would say, is finding the correct way to approach the other party. Being the other party, negotiating party, or even another colleague. I think that is key in diplomacy and how we connect with other people, how we connect with the other parties, and trying to build bridges. And I think that's the most challenging thing. And specifically in terms of nuclear diplomacy, there are many challenges. As I pointed at the beginning, for me, the technical background was a challenge at first. And so I think that is something that sometimes can make you feel that, okay, I'm not going to be able to continue in this path because I don't have the knowledge. Well, no, that's not it. You can get the knowledge. But I think that thinking about my generation, the most challenging thing is the context, is the geopolitical context. And as Jenny said, right, she has witnessed and she has been participating actor in many of the negotiations of the most important arms control treaties. And many decades ago, this has stopped, and many difficulties have appeared in the general context. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges nuclear diplomacy is facing right now.
I think I might add to that. People would say, well, were you a biologist or a chemist or nuclear physicist? And what was always important was on the delegations, you have technical expertise. So you needed to know enough. You had to learn the science you were the translator of the science into policy. And one of the reasons why the visiting fellows were so important at CNS was that it was my Ukrainian friends who were working at Chernobyl who came to me at a meeting in Kyiv and said, we have law degrees, we have nuclear security, safety, we've got 5 degrees, but we need policy experience. And so we brought them to the Visiting Fellows program to teach them how to interact, how to sort of put a cap on the technological background that's essential. And now they're all leaders. They've moved straight up the chain, and they all credit the fact that they came to CNS and were given this policy experience. So again, you have to know what the science is so you don't write something in and really get in trouble. But you can always turn around and ask someone, and that's maybe the lessons learned too. Never be afraid to ask. It never hurts to ask, and a good handshake. And in fact, I have a t-shirt that says it never hurts to ask. And my husband says, are you sure you want to wear that t-shirt? But I'm sort of famous for this phrase.
Great. What you are mentioning is very important. So thank you for the answers. Now we have a question from in the chat, a participant in the chat that said, wow, what an inspirational talk. Thank you so much. I feel so lucky to be here. I am a teacher teaching in nuclear field as well, and I was wondering what kind of a study you would recommend for a student to reach your kind of positions. What about the international comparison or item?
One thing that's very important to me and to all of you is cross-discipline work. So our son was studying the way that nuclear policy was developed in the US, where we had our scientists feeling very guilty and working with academics and sort of arguing back and forth about what deterrent strategy would be, and seeing if that policy development could be something used in the climate change realm. Our way of disarmament is a thing of the past. The more, and I always emphasize, don't just do nuclear, do chem and bio. You saw from COVID, and the AI on top of bio in countries of concern is scary. So be diverse enough. Don't just do AI, but make sure that there's an angle of it that makes you unique. So for me, my suggestion would be keep it cross-domain as much as you can and gather lessons from different communities.
Perfect.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Jenny was saying, and I think that this cross-discipline work and the diversity gives different points of view and always makes really good contributions. I think about our diplomatic service in Argentina. We have colleagues that come from medical science, engineering, law, and everybody has something to contribute from a different perspective of analyzing the same thing. So I think that also, apart from the cross-discipline, I mean, you can get into this field of work and contribute from a different perspective and bring in diversity as well.
I spoke yesterday with a Brazilian oceanographer. He was using satellite imagery to track whales and became interested in the security of satellites. So he's going to do an oral history project with people who used to do the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. He's a Brazilian oceanographer.
That is
amazing. A good friend who I think is on here now, who's also a bioscientist who's making his way in the nuclear world, because the bio world doesn't have the networks that we do in the nuclear. No. So start your own networks. It doesn't take anything but WhatsApp group.
Great advices, girls.
If I just can add one little comment on this, and I want to take this opportunity as well to recognize, right? Because while I've known Florencia from my work in Argentina, I know also Agostina, and also Gabriela Costa, who works there in the National Regulatory Authority, and they have been very, very important for me as an example of reaching out and building these networks, and being in this event is also a result of that. So I just wanted to highlight that and say that I feel very grateful.
And for me, it's the Black Sea Women in Nuclear Network that's now across 30 countries, and we have so many people. And yesterday, when there's an earthquake in Turkey, you write and ask how they are. When our friends are being attacked in Kyiv and Odessa, they write and say, my kids are in a closet, we don't have any light, thank you for thinking of us. It's just extraordinary to be part of groups where you can have daily contact across the globe. And thank God for WhatsApp and Signal, because these networks make you feel you're never alone. And that's really, really an important thing to feel.
Great. You are incredible women, you know.
Just
we
friends.
We
met here.
We have another question. First, we have a question for Maite. And this, what is the most important piece of advice from Jenny for you?
Wow, it's very difficult to choose one. I mean, I would say that having this experience since we started, this is the biggest piece of advice she's giving me. I think just sharing her time, her generosity, since we find out that we were going to share this panel. And one thing that we spent quite a long time talking to each other and thinking about this presentation and talking about our careers. And I had that conversation with her. And for me, I don't know, I didn't tell you this, Jenny, you're going to hear this now for the first time, but it was very encouraging. I went back home
Good.
and I remember I told my husband about it. I was so happy about it, and it just encouraged me for the future. And I think her life experience, sharing her career with me, and listening to what I have to say, and giving value to what I have to say, and highlighting this that she said during the webinar, that we need you, right? We need you. And that encompasses also a responsibility, and that really encourages me into wanting to continue in this path, and really looking forward for the future. So I think this whole experience is the biggest advice you can give me, and I feel very grateful. So thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I think what's important for people
problem.
to realize that people like me who've done it 40 years, or my boss who've done it 50 years, what's the most important thing we can do to give back? It's finding you and helping you take our place. Realize how heartfelt this is. If you don't fill in, even though the world is on fire, we need you to rebuild the structures and stay close to each other, and never fear for being in touch with people, because our sole purpose now is to help you. You're never too high level. It all turns over again. The mentorship programs, the mentor and mentee, you can't imagine what my Dutch mentee has done for me in the last 2 weeks. She checks my resume, she checks my Zoom link. We talk about what's worth emphasizing. Just remember that no one's more senior than anyone else. We're all in this together.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. So we have the last question, because we have not more time, but Lancina from Burkina Faso asked the following question. Is there a program to allow African diplomats to learn about scientific diplomacy, and in particular nuclear diplomacy?
I know that many of us are working in Africa with Africans, and so many of the really interesting people I've met through the CNS Visiting Fellows from Kenya and South Africa, and Lucina Zerbo is from Burkina Faso. Everyone's an ambassador for their country. But I know that the G7 countries are working to promote nuclear education in Africa. And Jacek Bilica is always talking to me about whether we can get the course that's taught in Mexico also taught in Africa. The Marie Curie Fellowship, you should apply for this. We need to have something specific for you, but at the same time, as long as we make sure there's room and pay the money for you to travel, you need to be part with everyone. So it doesn't become just Western people, my Indian and Pakistani friends, people can't pay to bring us to Europe. And I said, well, you've got Rakesh Sood, and we have networks in your own countries. So again, you could start with Lucina and he could connect you. So please reach out. This was a great question. Thank you.
Fine. Well, unfortunately, there is no more time. Otherwise, I will stay and chat with you. So thank you again, Jenny and Maite, for sharing your experience and wisdom with us, and congratulations for your work. And well, to the public, thank you to everyone who joined today. It is always a pleasure to see this community exchange ideas. So I will now hand the floor back to Eva, our leader, for the closing remarks. Eva, the floor.
Thank you, Florencia. Wow, what a webinar this has been. Oh, I sometimes tears came to my eyes. I'm so grateful that I ran into Jenny 2 months ago in Washington, D.C. at the INMM, and that we connected and that we discussed of her sharing her experience with us. So this is the opportunity. I'm also so grateful to Maite whom I have known too little. At least now I know all the great things you have achieved in your young life. Congratulations on that. So a big thank you to our two panelists to this very impressive webinar, to which I agree with everything you have said, also from my own experience. Thank you also to Florencia for moderating it so well. It was really great. Thank you for that. And to all the panelists for participating. And Lancina, there are more opportunities for people like you. We will talk separately on that. We are connected anyway. So thank you very much. And Jenny, I look forward to seeing you soon in Brussels for the mentoring conference and the European Non-Proliferation Conference. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks for participating.
Thank you. Thank you so much.